Hello, and welcome to the Atomic Lizards podcast. It's time for our new Our Favorite series where we take turns talking about our personal favorite films. I'm Huri, the de facto film expert.
I'm Myranda, the film fanatic.
And I'm Dan, the kaiju extraordinaire.
And today we're talking about one of my personal favorites, the 2013 film Prisoners. When Keller Dover's daughter and her friend go missing, he takes matters into his own hands as the police pursue multiple leads and the pressure mounts. But just how far will this desperate father go to protect his family? Directed by Denis Villeneuve and written by Aaron Guzikowski, this film was Denis Villeneuve's first American film, and it has a star-studded cast of Hugh Jackman as Keller Dover, Jake Gyllenhaal as Detective David Loki, Maria Bello as Grace Dover, Terrence Howard as Franklin Birch, Paul Dano as Alex Winterman Jones, Viola Davis as Nancy Birch, Melissa Leo as Holly Jones, and David Desmalchian as Bob Taylor. If you haven't watched the movie yet and you would like to avoid spoilers, I know it's a movie that's 10 years old at this point, but if you haven't watched it yet and you would like to avoid spoilers, probably just stop now and then come back after you've watched it. But otherwise, here we go. So, guys, what did you think of Prisoners?
All right, I will start off with my thoughts. So, Prisoners, I had never heard of this movie before. So, I just first impressions, just hearing the title Prisoners, like I was thinking that it was going to be a movie about people, I don't know, about people in prison. I mean, it's called Prisoners, so I'm thinking, okay, is this going to be about people trying to like break out of prison or something? I don't know. Let's watch it and find out. Oh my god. This movie was so freaking good. I was hooked the entire time. Like I when I'm watching a movie, like the past couple of movies I've been watching lately, like there will be times when I get a little disinterested, so like I may start like just checking my email really quick while I feel like a boring scene is on or something like that, or I'll just look at something, and then once things start picking up a little bit, then I'll start paying attention again. Don't worry, I won't do that at the theater, but that's besides the point. Anyway, with Prisoners, I never felt the need to like look at something on my phone or check my email or whatever. I was hooked the entire time. I wanted to keep watching. I wanted to keep seeing what happens next because damn, this was such a good movie. Like so many twists and turns. Like I didn't know what was going to happen next. Like what's this going to lead to? What's that? Like what's the story behind Paul Dano's character? Like did he actually kidnap them, or was he just somebody that happened to get all, mixed up in this? Like is he actually a bad guy or not? And then Hugh Jackman, like, oh my god, like what is he doing? Like is Jake Gyllenhaal gonna get him? Like what's gonna happen next? Like, oh, it was so freaking good. I had such a good time while watching this movie. The writing was great. Once again, characters were great. Acting was top tier. Man, just great recommendation, Udi. What a movie to start off with.
Hell yeah. That makes me happy to hear. What about you? What are your thoughts, Miranda?
Well, yeah, I didn't like it. It's not my vibe. Uh, it just made me feel like sick, and it was icky, and I like just nauseous. Like I just felt terrible watching it the whole time. Um, like I I don't gravitate towards these movies that are more, I hate to say realistic, but unfortunately sometimes kids do get kidnapped, which really, really sucks. So it is a little too close to like things that have actually happened. So it's like not far away enough. It's not far away enough from like it's not disconnected enough, I guess, to real life. So I did not like watching it. It's well made. The actors do a great job at portraying the emotions, and you can actually like see and feel and like understand what they're going through and how this is a terrible thing that has happened, and all the characters' reactions to that and how that affects them, and then how that affects their choices. Um and, like, it is well written, it's well, like, composed, like, Denny is a very good filmmaker. Like, Arrival, I also felt kind of like, I had very much a lot of anxiety while watching that movie, but since it dealt with aliens and science fiction, I like that a bit more, same with Dune and Blade Runner 2049. Whereas I was expecting aliens in this one too, because that's what I know his other films to be, so, that's a bit of a viewer thing, whereas I was expecting something and I didn't get it too, so that also kind of influenced how I was watching it. But there are definitely moments where you get, like, drawn into the story, and there are some twists that I wasn't expecting in it.
Valid. I just think it's kind of funny to think about like sitting there watching this movie, this like really dark, serious thriller, and sitting like, I wonder how aliens are gonna fit into It's
Dude,
pretty funny.
how epic would that have been if like Detective Loki just came across aliens
Aliens are the
during
ones
his
that abducted the kids.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, 10 Cloverfield Lane, that's a kidnapping movie with aliens, so it's, like, possible that this one
It's
could have
true.
had it. I don't know how it would have fit it in or if it would have how it would have affected the story, but based off of previous experiences, that's what I was thinking was going to happen.
That's valid. That's valid, but it's like it makes sense. Like the points that you're making make sense because he has done a lot of sci-fi, but it's just funny to me to think like the whole time you're watching this, you're like, man, when are the aliens gonna come in?
I kinda assumed they were going to be in here just off of how the movie started, but, like, it's like,
Crazier things have
maybe.
happened.
Yeah.
That's funny. I like that. No, that's fair. I mean, yeah, I had a feeling you weren't gonna like this one to be honest.
Okay.
But I was like, look, between having to choose between this and like Hereditary, you'd like this one better than Hereditary,
Oh,
but
yeah, definitely. I can't do Hereditary or Midsommar.
yeah. But
They are not my vibe at all.
yeah, no. But for like I figured at the very least, like you said, like you'd be able to enjoy the filmmaking aspects at least and it wouldn't traumatize you. Well, as much as like Hereditary would at least.
Hereditary is different because that's, like, a proper, like, thriller, scary horror film, where this is is a is a cop movie, kind of,
Yeah.
adjacent.
Just a
So,
crime thriller,
yeah,
basically.
crime thriller.
Yeah.
That's a better
That's
way to describe it.
suspenseful crime thriller.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all right, I'll give my brief thoughts before we start going more in depth. Obviously, this is one of my favorites. I would still say, and I mean, it's hard. It's like darn near impossible to say my number one for sure favorite movie of all time is blankety blank. Like that's very hard for like anyone that loves movies. It's very like because there's so many different feelings and vibes and emotions that you get from different movies and things like that. However, I still think overall that I would consider this to still be like my number one favorite. Like again, it's hard to say because it's an impossibility, but if I had to choose just one, like to show someone, I would say this. But yeah, I just kind of like how Dan said, like from the moment I first saw this movie, I was just immediately hooked. I was just immediately I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I had no idea where the story was going or what the mystery was gonna um like how it was gonna resolve or like how the kids are gonna be found, if they were even gonna be found. Like I had no idea where it was gonna go, and it felt so real. There was moments in this where it feels like you're watching people's lives. It doesn't feel like you're watching a movie. Like it feels like reality, and that's probably to do with like the subject matter, unfortunately. But it feels very real, and that's by design, and I think everyone involved did a phenomenal job of performing and or like with the cinematography, the score, just capturing the feelings and the emotions that people would be feeling and have unfortunately felt. Um, but yeah, just across the board, Denis, Aaron, like the writer, Johan Johansson, the composer, and the cast, just top to bottom, everyone firing on all cylinders. Just a phenomenal thriller. But yeah, without further ado, what did you guys think of, I guess, broadly, like the mystery? Like, were you guys able to figure it out, or were you guys confused up until like the last possible second?
I did not see it coming, honestly, because like here's the thing. Like I was wondering the whole time because like I said in my first impressions, like what is the deal with Paul Dano's character who's like you said his name's Alex Jones. Okay, let's get all of our Alex his name's Alex Jones. Yes. And like that one scene where he's in the police station and it's like Alex Jones has the IQ of a 10-year-old. That joke writes itself. Okay, we can all get our laughs out of the way. All right.
That's why I made sure to write Alex Winterman Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's so unfortunate. I'm so
It
glad that
is.
his character. We'll get there. I won't.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alex Winterman Jones. That's yeah. Sorry, continue though.
Yeah. But I was just wondering how it does he fit into this? Is he responsible or is he not? Because yeah, like they said, he has the IQ of a 10-year-old and like we and we'll find out later why that is. And you're thinking, you know, because they play it very vague and they give you like certain clues to kind of make you think, okay, maybe he is legit because you got that one line he says to Hugh Jackman where he's like, they only cried when I left them or something like that, which is a red flag. And then another red flag is the scene where I think Hugh Jackman is like stalking him and he's walking his dog and then he just like picks the dog up by the collar and like you can hear the poor thing like crying or whatever and he's just like looking at it and you're thinking, oh, what is going on there? Because you know, like if you watch like true crime stuff or you listen to true crime podcasts and you know you hear about serial killers, you always hear that serial killers like love harming animals. So when he like picked that dog up, I was thinking, ooh, that's a major red flag there. Like, but is that a red flag or is that just because he literally has the mind of a child and he doesn't know any better? We don't know. So when it's revealed that the kidnapper is actually his aunt and not him, then it's like I just that completely threw me for a loop because she was literally like one of the last people I was expecting, and I think the filmmakers did a really great job of like, you know, kind of misdirecting you from that with how they wrote the character of Alex Jones or what's his name, Alex Winterman Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
Or
how they
Barry.
yeah, because we do find out that there was a kid because when Jake Gyllenhaal's character Detective Loki is like kind of investigating the kidnapping, he finds out that there was a kid who was also kidnapped like what was it 10 years ago or so or longer than
That
that
was like
20 like
20
yeah
something years before.
20 something years ago. Yeah, this kid named Barry that was kidnapped a really long time ago, and we find out that Paul Dano's character is that kid that was kidnapped 20 years ago. So yeah, his real name is actually Barry, not Alex Jones. But yeah,
Thank God.
yeah, really. But seriously, I couldn't help but chuckle there. Like I already mentioned it, but I couldn't help but laugh at that. Alex Jones has the IQ of a 10-year-old. It's like, come on.
Facts.
Yeah. But no, I thought they did a really good job of like writing that character to kind of keep you guessing. And then what just happens to him is just terrible. I felt so bad because like I didn't know how to feel about him at first because obviously Hugh Jackman's character thinks that Paul Dano is responsible for kidnapping his little girl. So he literally like kidnaps Paul Dano and like chains him to a bathroom and is like literally just torturing him to get the information out of him. You know, Hugh Jackman's character is one of those parents that's like, man, I would like literally do anything for my kid. It's like, yeah, you you really would do anything for your kid. And you know, I'm so conflicted because his little girl got kidnapped. Like, I can't imagine what it must be like to have a child, especially if it's your child that young, just get taken from you. Like, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I probably wouldn't go to the lengths of what Hugh Jackman did, but I just don't know how I feel about Hugh Jackman's character because, like, I want to feel bad for him and I want to sympathize with him, but on the other hand, he is torturing an innocent man. Granted, he doesn't know that he's innocent, he thinks that he's guilty, but even so, he's still like, this. I don't know, I'm so conflicted.
Yeah. I think that's one of my favorite things about the movie is that the movie ends, but you keep thinking about it because there's just so much moral gray here. Like, it's like some people really simplify it down and they basically say like the movie's like vigilantism is bad or vigilantism is good. I mean, I would say that it's not saying it's good at all. I would say it's definitely painting it more as bad. However, unfortunately, and this isn't necessarily because it's good or bad, it's just how life is sometimes. If it hadn't been for the actions of Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman's character, they might not have found his daughter in time. And so it's just one of those things of you think about like everything that he did and it's terrible. Like he's no better than the people that took his daughter because he took someone else's child essentially, tortured them, which is something that even I mean, yeah, I'm not saying what the Joneses did was any better, but like he physically tortured and almost killed this person with his bare hands and then put boiling hot or like freezing cold water, like doused them in it for a whole week. What he did. Uh, so he's no better than they were in his actions, at least. In intent, obviously better because he was doing it for a good reason, not necessarily that it justifies it, but he did it for a good reason, an understandable reason, even if he went far, like too far. Um, but yeah, it just keeps you thinking. It's like how because yeah, it's like one of those things of like you love your children, but you really don't know how far you would go to like protect them or to save them until you're in that situation. I feel like
Yeah, and what makes me feel even worse about it is that Paul Dano's aunt, her name's Holly, right?
yes,
Yeah. She reveals that all he wanted to do was take the girls for a ride. And like that just made me feel even worse because once again, he has the mind of a child. He doesn't know any better. And he just wants to, have take the girls for a ride and like have fun. He wants to show these children, he just wants to have fun with them and he didn't know what he was doing because his
yeah,
aunt was obviously manipulating him, so
he's been a victim literally his whole life, and then this
exactly.
happens to him.
Yeah, so that just made me feel even worse, but yeah, I was very enthralled by like the big twist of the mystery and then how it all came together because I did not see it coming.
I do have a follow up question, but I'm gonna wait until I ask Miranda. So Miranda, what did you think before I move on?
I mean, I felt like it came out of nowhere that it was the aunt who was kidnapping people. Like which maybe that was the point because you're being misled and you think it's um the one guy from Ant-Man. Uh David,
Oh,
what's
David Desmalchian,
yeah,
Bob
like
Taylor.
yeah, like you think maybe it's him and then it's like, oh, maybe it's Hugh Jackman's character. Maybe he kidnapped them, but then you're like, why would he kidnap them? Because like they left and he was still at the house, so like that doesn't make sense. So and then like him kidnapping and torturing um Alex Jones, like I did not like watching that. And he's like, talk, but like you first off, if you're punching someone consistently and constantly, they're not gonna be able to talk to you. Like I get why he did it and he wants information and he wants to save his daughter. But the twist of it being the aunt, like I don't know. I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess." So that was my reaction to that twist. So
Well, I guess this works out because my follow-up question to you guys is, what are your thoughts on the aunt, like her motivation for why she and her husband were doing, like basically the motivation for everything that happened, basically for the kids being kidnapped and all the kids in general that were kidnapped in the story.
could you explain what her motivation was?
Yeah. Their motivation, her and her husband's motivation for why they started kidnapping these kids was because they had a child and they got cancer and died, and as a way to wage war with God, because they used to be devoutly religious. I think either Christian or I don't know, but devoutly religious. And so, in order to wage war with God, and try to make other people, other families feel their pain and turn them against God, their plan was to try and kidnap children and take them away from families, just like their child was taken away from them. Basically, in a nutshell, that was the motivation.
I mean, it's like, classic just evil, mentally ill type of mindset where it's like, oh, I had to suffer, so I'm going to make everyone else around me suffer as well, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, like again, it's just one of those very interesting things because there's three different parties here. It's Keller Dover, who's devoutly religious, uh, Holly Jones and her husband, who were devoutly religious and lost their faith and wanted to turn everyone against God that they could, as like to get even, basically. And then you have Detective Loki, who doesn't really subscribe to any one particular faith or belief or anything. He's very open-minded, and that's characterized by like its physical characterization because he has like a Freemason, I think, ring, and then he has like several pagan tattoos and things like that. So kind of to symbolize like he's very open-minded and he doesn't subscribe to just a single sort of way of life or things like that.
I don't
Um,
know. His last name is Loki. Are we sure he doesn't believe in Odin?
Well, that's the other thing too, is that yeah, like his name is definitely like a play on that of like his name is like coming from Norse mythology, and then like all these other aspects just kind of play into that whole character. But
So I have a question then. Because you mentioned Holly Jones' husband, we find out like we find out like he was killed very early in the movie. He was like in this, like, I don't know, was it a basement in this priest's house? Did the
yeah,
priest kill him?
they did. Yeah, they lured him back to their house, and then like the priest was saying, he was like bragging about how he'd killed a bunch of kids and that he was gonna keep doing it and keep doing it. So then, because he was in confession, that's where he was telling him all this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then, and he was like laughing about it. So he lured him back to the house where he like tied him to the chair and threw him in the basement and kept him down there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
See, once again, like you were talking about, that's just a morally gray area right there. Because on one hand, that guy's a piece of crap and like deserves to be just thrown in a hole and forgotten about. But then on the other hand, like that's something for the justice system to decide. Like you can't, and you committed murder. It is a really bad person who probably, depending on your views, may have deserved to die. Who knows? But once again, like it's just like you were saying, morally gray area right there. So, I was gonna say if you have another like topic to shift onto, you can definitely do that. But I was gonna suggest we talk about the acting because I do want to talk about the acting.
yeah. You can go right ahead. What would you like to say?
The acting was phenomenal, man. Like one scene that stuck out to me was when Hugh Jackman shows Terrence Howard that he kidnapped Paul Dano, and then like just the fear that comes out of Terrence Howard's like voice, where it's like, "Man, what are you doing? Like, we can't be doing this." Like, that was, you guys talk about how that felt like, how this movie feels realistic. That was phenomenal acting right there. Like that felt real, honestly.
I agree. I think that whole segment or any of the sequences where it's Hugh Jackman and Terrence, and even when eventually he brings his wife Nancy, played by Viola Davis. just all of that, just it feels so real. Like it feels like conversations that these people in that situation would be having. Like Terrence being so conflicted, like knowing it's the wrong thing to do, and he keeps bringing up the point of like, what if you're wrong? Like, what if this person's innocent? Like, you don't know for a fact. Like Keller Dover is trying to convince himself that he is correct, that he knows in his bones that he's right. But Franklin Birch is just like, no, you don't know that. And he's like, I know you know that because I know you. I know who you are. You're a good person. And I know for a fact you don't fully believe that. Because you're not sure, you can't be sure. But he still convinces him to help him either way, and well, he was wrong. But I think another really powerful moment with like in these scenes that you brought up was when Keller brings over the hammer because he's like, all right, I've had enough, and he's like threatening to like smash Alex's hand on like the sink and whatever, and then he ends up like smashing the sink and then sticking it in the wall. But like as he's smashing the sink, it may just be Terrence Howard, who knows, but you can just see like fear in in Franklin's eyes as he's like watching this. Like from his perspective, like this is presumably one of like his best friends, and like they're adults, like they've probably known each other for a while, and like can you imagine seeing one of your best friends, like you've known each other for a while, you have kids, like your families are friends, blah blah blah, seeing like one of your best friends like torturing someone, like completely different planet of like things that you're of actions you're watching someone that you thought you knew so well doing. Like it's so interesting to think about.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And it's a good thing you brought up that scene because I did want to talk about that scene. Like that entire time, like I was just bracing for it. I was like, "Oh no, he's gonna smash his hand. He's gonna smash his hand." Like I was bracing for it. I was like, "Ooh, ooh." Thankfully, he never does it, but still. And then I remember thinking because I was thinking about you, Miranda, during that scene. I was like, "Oh no, Miranda's not gonna like this." Like,
Yeah, no. I did not like that part or any of the parts really. Um, although the acting is very good, I have to say, like they did a very good job to make it realistic and feel real and see that these characters, these people are struggling and they don't know what they're doing, and because of the situation it's causing them to do things they probably would have never even thought about doing. Um or like I think there's the scene with the mom, not not Viola Davis's
Viola.
character. Yeah, not her, but the other person.
Keller Dover's
Um
wife.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a scene where she's like laying in bed and she's upset and she's like yelling at Hugh Jackman. It's like, you promised to keep us safe and stuff. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't like this. I don't like the torture scenes. I don't like any of this because they're doing such a good job at portraying like this conflict, these uh these gray areas of like this situation where it's just like it's they're doing a good job. It just makes me feel bad and uncomfortable, and which I'm assuming that's probably some of the point of this movie. So that's not what I like seeing in movies. Um that's not why I watch movies. So to watch this, it's hard for me to say that it's good cuz it's covering tough things. But like the acting is good, the story is like good. There is good twists. There's good like even like compositions and like thought behind everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand where you're coming from, Miranda, because like we all watch movies for different reasons. Like,
Yeah.
you could argue that me and Udi just watch movies because we just love film, and you love film too, Miranda. But this is just me like thinking you might also watch movies just to escape from the mundaneness of life, and you watch movies to be entertained and to feel good. So when it comes to a movie like this where it's like not about, like having fun and going on adventures like that, it can be like, ooh, like I don't want to be sad, so like I can definitely understand where you're coming from.
That I don't mind watching movies that are sad, uh, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's a very good movie, and it does make me sad at parts. And like, there are other movies. It's just I've never been a person who is into like horror stuff. I don't like true crime things. Like I don't like hearing about like that type of stuff. It's just something that just makes me very anxious, and that's what this movie did to me, which is apparently a theme with Denny's movies. So far, they've all made me anxious except Dune. So,
Yeah. I mean,
Even
like I
Blade
said
Runner?
though.
uh I don't really remember watching Blade Runner,
Oh,
but I'm sure
Let's
I was like yeah. I don't really remember that one. I have to rewatch it.
that's fair.
But
What were you gonna
I
say?
still well, I was just gonna say I still understand where Miranda's coming from though. Like I can understand.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of that scene in particular that you brought up, Miranda, though, that is one aspect again that I really appreciate and that I think is like so well done. Is like showing how different people react to different things or how they handle different situations. Like the fact of the matter is, Keller Dover did what he thought would be best, but also like he was alone. Like he didn't have anyone really to bounce these ideas off of. He had to act alone because his wife was out for the count, and you can't blame her because how do you handle something like that? Like how do you deal with like losing your child and her potentially never coming back? Like how do you handle that? Like you can't judge her for dealing with it how she is or not dealing with it, but at the same time, like that's also part of the problem with Keller is that like, you also in a way can't judge him because he's just down to his convictions, what he believes in, and trying to do something about it because that's like the role that he has in his family. He's the doer, he's the protector, and again, like every family's different, every relationship is different, everyone is different. So like again, like it might not be right, and his actions were definitely obviously like right like good intentions of like trying to rescue his daughter but bad execution of doing what he did but yeah like you can't blame her for just like basically having to be medicated so that she can just sleep every day for like a week because she just can't handle like living in that moment like she just has to be asleep because she just can't stand to be awake for any of it and yeah it was interesting to see because I feel like in movies so often you like everyone's just doing something. Like you never get a character that just sits it out. And that's essentially what this was. And that's realistic. Some people just can't handle this sort of pressure and anxiety. And like I said, like it's not something you can blame someone over. Like some people just can't handle it. So I just thought that was an interesting touch. Sad. And I think for being in this movie for as little as she was, I think that she did a really good job.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like you mentioned her just saying she wants to sleep. Like I think back to that one scene. I forget exactly what was happening, but then she's just like, I just want to sleep. Like I just want to go to sleep. And I was thinking, oh man, just the acting here is phenomenal.
Yeah. And it's like in that moment, yeah, because that's the scene where he's like, okay, well, like let me help you, let me, and he's like trying to give her medication, and she doesn't even want him to help in that situation. Like she's
Yeah.
upset with him, and it's like how like how do you like put that on someone? Like how do you put that on your partner that like he didn't have anything to do with it. It wasn't his fault, but because of their relationship, like he was set up to be the protector, and how she like starts out like you made me feel so safe, like nothing would ever happen to us and like it's just a piling on like he's already feeling how she's feeling and then just piling it on and like she's not doing it on purpose or out of malice but that's just how she's processing things, and it's just it's so much to it.
Yeah. And you guys were talking about like scenes that made you anxious. There was one scene in particular where I was actually like nervous about like what was going to happen. And it's not even that bad. It was just the part where Keller finds out that they're going to let Alex Jones go. So like he's like, I'll be right back, and you just see him like storm off, and it's like showing like Alex Jones like, you know, signing the thing at the police station. And that entire time where it's just showing the police station, I was super nervous. I was like, oh no, Hugh Jackman's gonna show up and like just hell's gonna break loose, you know, like
And then it did.
yep. So, but you know, I had to like sympathize with Jake Gyllenhaal at some points because I was like, man, I do not envy this man's job because like he has to go by the law and whatever process that the law has in place. So when he's like telling Keller, I mean, this is we don't have any evidence to convict him. We can't convict him. And then Keller's like, oh, that's bullcrap. You know he's guilty and stuff like that. I was like, man, I do not envy this man because clearly he's trying to explain something to this other man that's in distress and just isn't willing to listen. So it's just like, ugh.
Yeah. And I will say that one thing that has stuck out to me from like the very beginning, and I would say with each repeat viewing has stuck out more and more. And maybe it's because of real life things. I don't know. But one thing that has stuck out to me so much, especially in this last viewing of this movie, was just how patient and calm and understanding Detective Loki is throughout this whole thing with like with the Dovers and like with the victims, basically. Obviously, with the people that he's interrogating, that's a whole different ballpark. They're in his eyes like bad guys or whatever. Like that's a whole other. I'm not even gonna get into it. It's a whole other conversation. But when it comes to like the families, like he puts up with so much crap from Keller Dover, but like he keeps his cool and he doesn't like raise his voice. He tries to stay calm and keep things diffused and not escalate things. I mean, like for example, like in the house when like he's talking to Keller and his wife, and then Keller is like, well, why are you doing this? Like, and he's like, well, if he's innocent, like blah blah blah. And he's like, I hear you. Like I understand where you're going with that, but Keller like won't listen, and so he like starts like screaming at him, and he's like, "Hey, like I need you to calm down and like relax. Like I hear you, I understand, but like I can't do anything about that." And then Keller like tones it down, whatever, blah. But like his composure in moments like that is just like wow. That is, I mean, that's his job, but like kudos, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say he probably has to be calm like that in his line of work, you know, because imagine how many
Supposed to be.
people. Yeah, imagine how many people he gets probably just screaming in his face like that, like all the time. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I do not envy that man's job.
And I think another like very prominent scene that like especially is like wow, that like especially like his job sucking is when when we kind of get like a sort of fake out where they find matching clothes that match the Birch's daughter and also the Dover's daughter from Bob Taylor's house, like the bloody clothes that they find, and it's a direct match to their kids. And you get the scene where Keller Dover like points at the bloody sock and he's like, "This is on you. Like you wasted time, and like I blame you, basically." I can't imagine being Loki in that situation. Like, you did everything you could. You tried to do everything by the book or as like close to the book as you could, and you did everything in your power to like help solve this. And then the parent sits there and just blames you, puts all the blame on you. God.
Yeah. Okay, I don't mean to like, because you know what, that scene is just such a like, you know, that's a very like serious scene because at that point Keller thinks that his daughter is dead. You know, so it's not something to like laugh at or anything. But I did have a kind of a funny moment while watching that scene because he's asking him to identify him by the clothes, and then he pulls out like a plain white sock. And I remember thinking in my head, dude, it's a sock. How are you going to identify someone by a sock? Like, all socks look the same. Like, seriously? But then he ends up identifying his daughter's clothes by a sock. So I was like, oh, okay.
I had a little bunny on it. That's
Yeah, that's
identifiable.
true. He did have a well. No, I'm just saying it's funny because I was just making fun of that fact, and then the movie's like, "Oh, I'll
Here's a
show you."
sock.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a sock, and not only is this is how he's gonna identify his daughters by this sock. That point you were just making fun of. So I don't know. I just thought that was a little funny moment on me at least because in my mind I was thinking, how is anyone gonna identify them by a sock? But sure enough, that's what happened in the scene.
Yeah. One other quick little thing I wanted to add on to Detective Loki real quick before moving on to a different scene. Um, I mean, there's so many like Jake Gyllenhaal played a very essential part in fleshing out this character and helping like pick some of the sort of symbolic choices, and like representing like again like the Freemason ring, like sort of like the different kinds of tattoos and blah 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 blah. And he worked directly with like the knee to try to like flesh out this character, just like in physical form without like really saying too much during like in the dialogue and whatnot. However, one touch that like I love, is his tick, like where he like
I
blinks a
was gonna
lot.
bring that up. I was gonna bring that up. I was gonna because like I was waiting for like a moment of pause, but I was gonna bring up. Yeah, one thing I noticed from watching Jake Gyllenhaal is he has like a tick where he like
Hmm.
blinks like really hard. Yeah,
It might very well be because of his childhood trauma, because as stated very slyly, I guess. He grew up in like a boys' home, like he as an orphan. That's why he doesn't like when he's talking to the priest. He's like, I wouldn't have a problem like whatever, like kind of threatening him because he's not a big fan of priests and stuff because he grew up in like a boys' home. So there's a lot to be assumed through that interaction in some of the dialogue where he says. I think it's more like an anxious tick or like a nervous tick.
yeah,
I've only seen this once, so I'm sure I've missed stuff in it. Just as a viewer watching it, it annoyed me.
That's fair. The other scene I wanted to talk about though, was the scene in the police station after they've arrested Bob Taylor, and he's in the interrogation room drawing mazes, and then Jake Gyllenhaal goes to interrogate him. Detective Loki goes to like ask him like, "What are you drawing? Like, stop drawing. Like, explain like why are you drawing this?" And all chaos ensues as he starts beating the crap out of him, and then the officers go to take him, like rip him off of Bob Taylor, and then Bob Taylor takes the gun and offs himself. What a scene! Oh my god.
yeah. That scene, like I remember thinking, oh, that was just poorly handled. Like from like a just it shouldn't have come to that. Like I felt like the scene itself was great, but like in the context of the movie, like I felt that was poorly handled because they shouldn't have even allowed him to like get the gun like that, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was definitely just Loki like losing it finally. Like he hit his breaking
Yeah.
point, and it was the wrong time. Not that there probably was ever a right time, but it was the worst time to do it. And then
I remember thinking, oh man, like Loki, he's fired or something. Like I remember thinking that like he messed up, but luckily that didn't happen.
yeah, well, yeah, they throw that line in. I guess there's some sort of like HR or internal affairs investigation or something. I don't know, but because even like the police captain mentions like, "Hey, we almost lost you to PSP, but we got to keep you, so that's a plus, right?" PSP being like public service personnel, I think.
Not PlayStation Portable.
Unfortunately, no. Loki would have made a pretty good PSP.
Yeah, that's like the first thing I thought of when I heard that. I was like, PlayStation Portable? What?
I just want before we move on from acting, I just had one last tidbit to add. Did you guys know that instead of Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal in leading roles before they were cast, Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale were attached for those two roles?
Mark Wahlberg?
Yep. I
Now,
think.
Christian Bale's a great actor, so I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think that would have been an issue. But Mark Wahlberg?
That'd be a
Hmm.
very different movie.
Yes, it
Well,
would.
who was gonna be who? I assume Christian Bale was gonna be Loki, right? or is he going to be Keller?
That's a good point, actually. I don't remember. I would.
I would think Christian Bale would have been Loki, and then Marky Mark would have been Keller.
I honestly kind of feel like it would have been the opposite. I feel like Christian Bale might have been Keller, and then Marky Mark would have been the cop.
Yeah, that too. It could have been either or, I guess.
But also, I think because I was like I've been doing like a bunch of different research throughout the week, but like one of the things supposedly one of the previously thought up dynamics was that the two characters are going to be roughly around the same age, but then they thought like that doesn't really make it too interesting as a dynamic. So then they purposely went with like a younger actor for Detective Loki, because even though like he's kind of propped up as like, oh, he's never failed a case, like he solved every single case that he's gotten so far. Um, like it's kind of like from Keller's perspective, like he's the older, gruffer, more experienced man being like given this younger detective, this younger hotshot detective, and then being like, "Oh, you go, you're like, here you go, here's this young guy, good luck," in like in his eyes, and so that kind of added more to the dynamic. Whereas like Christian Bale and Mark Wahlberg are roughly around the same age, and I don't know if those are the two they had in mind when they were like thinking about the dynamic, but I just know that those two were attached early on.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, thank God he wasn't in the movie though.
Yeah, really, honestly.
Poof. Dodged a bullet with that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so moving on, what did you guys like? Did you guys pick up on any particular themes or any particular like visual motifs or anything while watching the movie?
Good question. I'd have to think about that for a bit.
I mean, other than the fact that the entire movie is gray, not really anything specific.
That's valid. Also, like as you said, it's a little unfair because it's your first and only time you've watched this so far, and
Yeah.
potentially only time you're ever gonna watch it. But um, well, I have a specific example of one. And I didn't really even notice this until I think my previous viewing, which was, or a couple of viewings ago. I think it was like my third or fourth or fifth viewing. I don't know. Somewhere in that range is when I started to pick up on this. But there's a visual motif throughout the movie of trees. There's trees everywhere. There's two particular shots that are very, very evident. And I mean, they're everywhere in the movie. But the first shot is there's a shot of I think it's the Birch's house, and there's a tree, and like the camera just slowly zooming in to the tree, and it's very menacing, and I don't remember exactly what precedes it and what comes after it, but just that shot is like forever ingrained in my brain. And the other shot that I think is very prominent is when it's after something happens with Keller, and he gets in his truck and he's gonna drive off. It might be before he kidnaps Alex Jones. I think it might be like right before he goes to his house. But he gets in his truck and he sits there and he like turns the key and like the radio comes on and there's like a passage being like said on the radio. And in the reflection of the window of the passenger side door is just like a bunch of trees. Those two shots are very prominent in regards to like the visual motif of trees. But there's a few different interpretations that you could take that in. You could take it as like the tree of life. You could take it with like as representing like a family tree, or like families of trees connecting like the families, like everyone's struggle, like all these different families, not just the Dovers and the Birches, but like all the other affected families and stuff. So just a little food for thought.
Interesting. See, somebody like me just sees trees. Like I'm just looking at that and just thinking, okay, trees. Like I didn't even think about trees honestly, because it's just trees are something that's like so common that you see in your everyday life that I didn't even really think about that. So that's interesting. Although I do remember that one scene you were talking about at the beginning of the movie where like it zooms in on like the tree and it's like kind of ominous, because like that entire opening was great, because like as somebody like me, like you know, me and Myranda, I assume, both went into this movie just completely blind, because like I had never heard of this movie, and I like just going by the title, I thought it was going to be about people in prison. So Like that opening was very well done for me because like the whole time you just know like something bad is gonna happen. Just like the way it was filmed and the music and like everything.
Yeah, it definitely gives off that feeling because I turned it on and I was gonna watch it and I got a few seconds in and or a few minutes in and I was like, "Nope, not tonight." So I paused it and then started it again on a different day. And then I had to pause it again in the beginning like 3 or 4 times because I just knew something bad was gonna happen and I was like, "I cannot deal with this." So that may have also affected my viewing experience because I had to take breaks because it's just a lot going on in this movie. So, like, the trees and, like, you were mentioning, and the ominous?
Ambiance?
Not
Ominous?
ambiance. Ominous, there we go. Of, like, the opening. Like, they did a good job at creating that feeling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Shout out to Denis, as always.
Well, he does know what he's doing, so
Oh yes, he does.
Not gonna argue there.
One other fun little thing I figured I'd bring up is something that's very kind of blatantly given to us, but it kind of takes a little bit of thinking to ponder, I guess. But the title prisoners. If you think about it, everyone's sort of like a prisoner in this movie. You have some that are more literal, and then some that are a bit more metaphorical or take a little bit more thinking to consider. But like Alex Jones not only was a physical prisoner throughout the runtime of the movie, but also was a prisoner of the Joneses, like for most of his life, and he was a prisoner of being held captive. Like that's what a prisoner means. What I mean by that is just again like being held by the Joneses, being taken from his family and not really being like for all intents and purposes like he's a prisoner not just to them also but he has the IQ of a 10-year-old so he's a prisoner of his mind as well. Then you have Hugh Jackman who's a prisoner of his religion and his beliefs and everything that entails that. Then um there's a few other examples that I'm kind of blanking on, but yeah. And if you think about it and you like sit there and try to think all the different situations, for the most part, like all or most of the characters, in some way, shape, or form, are prisoners. So that's just another fun little
Oh yeah,
thingy-majiggy, another
that makes
layer.
sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. Because I remember thinking like, oh, how is the title of the movie gonna play into it? And then once Keller kidnaps Alex Jones, I was thinking, okay, so because Alex Jones here is clearly a prisoner. But I mean, yeah, you brought up some good points there. In some ways, pretty much everyone is a prisoner.
since everyone's, like, a prisoner and whatnot, and they have, like, the maze thing, does any of this, like, go back to, like, the Minotaur and the maze? Cause like, it's brought up, but, like, it's not like the maze was other than it being the medallion, like, it never really, I don't know, comes up or is explained or anything? Unless it is and I missed it. But, like,
I
through
mean,
your research, since you've seen it a lot, is there any symbolism there?
I wouldn't say anything very directly, like, because that was brought up a little bit in my research, and I don't, from what I remember, nothing really precisely, like, specifically about like the Minotaur or anything like that. In a way, you could technically say that like Holly Jones, in a way, was Keller Dover's Minotaur. But I mean, that would be very much looking at it from a very trying to find a very direct representation of that. But I would say it's maybe kind of like they're kind of flirting with that, like obviously with the maze and all of that. But I don't know if there's a direct, at least that I can remember. I could be wrong. Not that I can remember. At least is there like a very direct or apt comparison to that though. But that is a very good because yeah, I mean mazes become very important in the third act, so that is a valid point to bring up.
Based off of, like, the poster, since the maze is on, like, the poster, I think, and it is in the 3rd act brought up, um, I was expecting an actual maze. So, is it other than it being the medallion, like, is it a metaphorical maze? like I probably need to rewatch this movie again, but like
I mean, it can be a metaphor. I mean, the girls are physically, and like any of the children, basically the system, as far as I know, is basically like the Joneses would take children and give them an LSD and ketamine cocktail. That's what, like, that purple drink that like she gives Keller, uh, when he, like, at the end. That's what she gives them. But that's what they give the kids. It's like a little cocktail drink of LSD and ketamine to like drug them and keep them compliant. But basically, they gave him this book of mazes because, I don't know, just because Mr. Jones liked mazes, I guess. They give him this book of mazes to solve, and if they can solve them in time before whatever arbitrary time they come up with, or however long they want to keep those kids, then they escape. Like Bob Taylor. Bob Taylor was a kid that the Joneses kidnapped, but he was able to get out. But he just was never able to escape the prison of his mind. That's another prisoner. but but yeah, he escaped their grasp, and like he was let go. But because it was like, also, just to be clear for listeners and for you guys, uh because of the drugs, he couldn't remember who took him or why or how it happened. Like, he just escaped, but he, for all intents and purposes, was never able to live past that part of his life. But anyway, but yeah, so like basically the Joneses would do that. They would kidnap the kids, give them the mazes, and if they solve the mazes in time, then they would get to go free. They just probably wouldn't remember anything, like Bob Taylor. But if they didn't get, like, solve the mazes in time, then they would just kill the kids, basically. So so that's like a very prominent maze thing. And then as far as
oh,
like,
okay.
yeah.
I guess that's making more sense now. Cause like when they're at the house with all the snakes, he's like, "Oh yeah, there's a maze book." I guess,
Okay, I just want to
right?
say, I just want to say real quick that scene with all the snakes was kind of inadvertently funny because every time Jake Gyllenhaal would open a suitcase, he'd be like, "Oh shit," or whatever, and this every time a snake would come out. I thought that was a little funny.
Yeah. But I mean, like, yeah, that's how I would react. But I
Yeah.
mean, he had to open every one. You know, you're already there. You got to make sure that none of them have
That
kids.
that scene was tense too because yeah, you see all those suitcases and you're just thinking, "Oh no, like those suitcases are big enough to just stuff a child's body in there." Like, and then
Yep.
he's opening them up and you're just thinking, oh no, what's he gonna find? What's he gonna find?"
But speaking of that, another fun symbolic thing is Detective Loki finding snakes, because one of the symbols that are used to represent Loki from Norse mythology is two snakes circling each other, forming an S shape. And then often, because he can shapeshift and do that sort of thing, the Norse mythology version of Loki, not this character in the movie, he can change into a snake. So just
That's
another
what
little fun.
Detective
should have
Loki
been.
just shapeshifts.
Shapeshifters. Hey, that
Shapeshifter
would get my
Loki.
aliens in there.
Yeah, there
It's
you go.
true. Um, and I don't know how much I really have to say about this, but um, one other fun thing, I guess, to think about is how, as far as like when you're sitting there ruminating on post movie thoughts after watching this, is thinking about like possible ways to interpret this movie as well, and other things, is like Detective Loki basically represents the institution, while Keller Dover represents the individual, and seeing how the actions of each kind of interact with the actions of the other, and vice versa, and how there's like a cause and effect, and like tugging at each like specific thing, like the institution versus the individual. So another fun little thing to think about, I guess. But yeah, it's just so many different layers to this, and it's why it's part of the reason I love this movie, is because there's so much added here, and there's so much layering, and so much like hidden characterization and symbolism throughout, and there's so much just thought. Like, in a way, you don't need to know any of this, and it would not change your experience whatsoever. Like, you can watch this and not know anything about this, and it will not change your experience. But just knowing about it, and like witnessing it, observing it while watching, it just like elevates the experience, and like it just gets you thinking about it. And again, at the end of the day, that's part of the reason why I like one of the reasons why I love this movie is because even after it ends, you just can't help but think about so many things that went on and like interactions and just all, like thinking about the morality of it all. Just so many different things. Just so interesting. But anyway, um, do you guys have any other specific things you wanted to talk about or bring up on the movie before we start ranking or anything?
I mean, nothing too specific, but it was interesting because when I was watching this, because once again, I knew nothing about this movie, even the cast. Like, I mean, I knew Jake Gyllenhaal was in it, and I knew Paul Dano was in it because you had mentioned that before, Udi. But I didn't know Hugh Jackman was in it. So when I was watching it, I don't know what it was, but Hugh Jackman, like, looked a little different. I don't know if it was his hair or what, but the whole time I was thinking, wow, this guy kind of looks like Hugh Jackman. Because I didn't know it was actually Hugh Jackman. So I was thinking, is this Hugh Jackman? I mean, he kind of looks like, because there were times where it's like, okay, this kind of looks like Hugh Jackman because I was thinking of the way he looked in Logan. I was like, okay, he kind of looks like how
Mm.
he looks in Logan. But then at other times I was like, now he kind of doesn't look like Hugh Jackman. So then once I finished the movie, I was looking at the credits and I was like, oh, it was Hugh Jackman. Okay. Like, I don't know what it was, but like, I didn't instantly recognize him at first for some reason.
I feel like this is one of the few times where they try to make him look less beautiful.
Oh,
Like his haircut isn't that great. It's kind of a crappy, like, whatever. And like his facial hair is very just meh. So like it's one of the few times where they like purposely tried to like tone down how handsome Hugh Jackman is. So could be that.
understandable.
Doesn't have his luscious locks. He's just got like a carpenter's haircut. Which I mean, he's a carpenter in the movie, so that
Makes
makes sense.
sense. Yeah. Oh, and another thing I want to mention real quick. I think there's one part where like I think it was Detective Loki. He's talking to Paul Dano and he's like, "Stop giving me these riddles or whatever." Foreshadowing.
There is a meme that came out before like the Batman where it was like stop messing around or like stop like basically yeah but like stop telling me these riddles, just tell me already. And it was like a fun little Batman meme. I thought it
Yeah,
was funny.
that is pretty good.
But yeah, if you guys don't have any other thoughts before we get to ranking, I guess I'll just ask because it's kind of I just want to hear what you guys have to say. What did you guys think of the ending? Do you think Detective Loki found Keller Dover?
Okay, see, that's what I was gonna say. Is that I guess as much as I enjoyed my time with this movie, that the one little nitpick I have is the ending because like maybe that was the point is to kind of leave it open ended like that because I'm assuming he found Keller. So I was like, it would have been nice if like they would have shown him finding Keller because I wanted Keller to be found. Like I thought that really sucked about how he was kind of tricked by Holly Jones and then forcefully put in that hole. But I do have to say, like, once again, I've never been in a situation where somebody is like literally holding me at gunpoint. But there's a point where he's like in the car and like she her hands are right next to his head and I know he's handcuffed, but he's handcuffed from the front. She's like an 80-year-old woman and he's like a 20, 30, or like 30, 40-year-old man. He could easily overpower her, I think.
He's also drugged out of his mind with LSD and ketamine.
I guess, but still.
That man drank a third of a 2-liter bottle of ketamine and LSD. He is not in the state of mind.
That is a valid point. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so I was assuming that yes, I think Detective Loki did find Keller because we've seen like Loki is very smart. He's always looking for like clues and whatnot, and like always like very perceptive. And I don't think at least for me personally, I don't feel like after hearing the whistle, like after hearing Keller blow on the whistle, I don't think he would just shrug it off and be like, "Oh, it's whatever." I think he would continue to like investigate and figure where that's coming from. So I do think that he found him, but I just wish that they could have shown that scene. But then again, that might have been the point of that ending is to leave it open like that. So it's like, did he find him? Did he not? Who knows?
What about you, Miranda?
Uh, well, I'm glad that the girls are relatively okay. I mean, obviously they're traumatized. Uh,
They're
but they're
alive, at
not dead.
least. Yeah.
Um, and then like I assume Alex Jones was reunited with his family,
Yeah,
right?
there was
Yeah.
like a news article, I think, or something that literally just says he was reunited with his family after 26 years or however many years it was.
Yeah. And then like as like I liked those parts of the ending, and like I I wasn't expecting, like, I knew he found the whistle in the hole, but when like you start to hear the faint whistling, I'm like, how is he alive? He was severely drugged and then shot to bleed to death. So like, I guess I was kind of confused on the timeline, but I mean, they probably saved him. I feel like that's what Detective Loki would have done. He would have figured out wherever the whistle was coming from. But I don't think they wanted to show that because as like morally gray and uh how this movie makes you think about things, I think by showing you that specific ending of him finding him would have taken away from like the questioning and the like thinking about all the different things that have happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the movie respects its audience enough to like think about how the characters acted throughout the movie and then decide for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, while we're on the subject of the film's ending, I just want to say that scene where Loki rescues what was the name of the little girl? Was it
Anna.
Anna?
Yeah, Anna. Sorry.
Anna. That scene where Loki rescues Anna was super tense
Oh yeah.
because like he's like speeding down the road, it's snowing cuz so you're thinking, "Oh no, like he could easily just get in an accident." He's like literally ripping through traffic. Freaking Holly got a shot on him, so his like eye is bleeding, or like the above his forehead is just bleeding, so he has to close one eye. Oh, that scene was so tense. Very good.
Plus like the score.
Yeah.
And I love the touch of before he gets to the hospital. You get those few like moments where it's like the camera is like starts focusing on just the windshield of the car, so you just see like the snow melting on the windshield, and it's everything goes out of focus, and you're like, oh no, is he gonna pass out or what's gonna
Yeah.
happen? And then all of a sudden you get in like big red like letters, you get hospital, and he comes into focus, and you're like, oh, he made it, and he just cuts across and makes it and saves the day.
So freaking good. It's just the whole time I was thinking, "Oh man, like I can't imagine like driving that fast in the snow like, oh."
I don't know why, but my first thought when I was watching that, I'm like, I wonder what Dan thinks of this scene. I wonder how he feel about driving that fast in
No.
One of the thoughts that popped in my head during that was scene was like, oh, they're showing people who don't wear glasses what it's like to drive in the snow and rain at night with astigmatism. Because like my eyesight is not that bad, obviously. Like I have glasses, I can drive, like I've passed the tests. But like it gets like that sometimes. Like I don't know if people who don't wear glasses realize how like starbursty lights can get, but I don't know, that's the thought that came into my mind.
Oh no, I agree because I have really bad eyesight as well. I got astigmatism in both eyes and my glasses are like super thick. And there are times when I am driving at night and it's like, yeah, people if like there's a lot of lights, it's like, oh, like it's kind of getting a little hard for me to like focus and see.
Struggles of being blind.
Exactly.
Can't relate.
Look at you, Mr. 2020 vision over here.
Just going back to the ending, real quick. I just wanted to say that I would say it's fairly like 99.9% certain that Loki did in fact get Killer. Like throughout the movie, we've seen that he's extremely persistent and perceptive, as Dan said, and like he would not just let that go. He would like if he had heard it once or twice, he would have been like, yeah, it was just the wind or something. But like those last few whistles, like he was like, no, I definitely heard that. That's not like nature. That I definitely heard that, and he would keep investigating. And at the end of the day, like a car over a wooden plank is really not that hidden. Like you'd be like, "What's this wooden plank doing here?" Back up the car, and like, "Oh my god, there's a hole there." So I think he found him and just he went to jail for God knows how many years. But yeah, I think he found him.
If he lived.
I think he did. Well, I think the other thing too to consider is like presumably because he's very much like Keller is very much characterized as like a prepper. Um,
Yeah.
that he would have a lot of like survival experience, especially like being a hunter and all that. So I feel like he would have found some way to
A
make
tourniquet.
a tourniquet and survive. So
It's good knowledge to know how to do a tourniquet if it
yeah,
ever, comes up.
yeah. I would like to learn, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
um,
We could have a spin-off podcast. Miranda teaches Dan and Udi survival skills.
new
Lord
video
knows I could use
series.
that.
But all right. So what star rating would you guys give Prisoners?
I guess I'll go first since I went first in the rotation. So, yeah, man, like I said, I really, really enjoyed this movie. It had me hooked the whole time. Acting was phenomenal. Writing was very good. So many twists and turns that I didn't see coming. It actually made me feel things like it made me feel, well, what I mean by that is like, it made me feel anxious, like you guys were saying. Like, not a lot of movies can do that to me. Like, sure, movies can make me feel happy and sad and whatnot. And, if it's a horror movie, definitely scared. But, like, I've never felt, like, anxious when watching a movie before. So that was honestly kind of cool to me. So, just everything was just so well done that I have to give it 5 stars.
Hell yeah, 5 stars. Woo, woo, woo. All right. What star rating would you give it, Miranda?
Well, as I've said before, not really my vibe. I'm gonna give it a 2.5 out of 5. Now, that's not saying it's a bad movie. I'm not saying that it's not a well-made movie. It just the way it makes me feel is not great, so I can't really give it more than that. Like, yeah.
Valid, valid. Painful, painful. Hurts my ears, but I understand.
I mean,
I understand it's not your kind of movie.
I really did try watching this movie. Like,
I know,
I
I
really
know,
sat down and I really don't want to hate on it because it's
I know,
not a bad movie.
I know.
It's,
It's not
it's
your
just
vibe.
not my vibe.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I'm not upset about it. It hurts, but I understand. It's not your kind of movie. Like I said, like of the 4 movies I'm gonna have us watch, I was like, I'm not making you watch Hereditary, but one of these movies has to be played. So Prisoners is, to put it this way, the lesser of two evils. So I figured you would appreciate some things about it, but it's very much not up your alley and your kind of vibe. So I get it. But I mean, it's one of my favorites. It should be pretty clear what I would give it. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5. I think again, it's if I had to like when people ask me, I say like it's like impossible to say. But if I had to pick just one movie, Prisoners would be my favorite movie of all time. It's so there's just so much here, there's so much to think about, so much to like ruminate on, and just the performances, score by the late Johan Johansson, and cinematography, Roger Deakins. It's so good. So 5 out of 5, and that brings the Atomic Lizards podcast average score of 4.16. But Letterboxd doesn't take that, so it'll be a 4 out of 5.
Excellent.
Excellent. All right. Well, then that'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about Prisoners. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes on more new releases and favorites. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes, and as always, you can find us on Instagram at Atomic Lizards Pod and on Letterboxd at Atomic_Lizard. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.